boys and girls, thank you for coming out to tonight's London area real estate investors club. Who's here for the first time? Anybody? Me. Come on, liars. Zach Cahill, first time. Yourself?
Yeah, Martin.
Martin? Oh yeah. You're way taller than your picture on Facebook. Way taller. Wow. A lot taller. Yeah. Cool. Good to meet you. Thanks for coming. Absolutely. First time. Anybody else? Zach, we met briefly. We'll talk more. And then Lynn. Big round of applause for Lynn, ladies and gentlemen. First time to an investor meetup ever. Make sure you say hi to Lynn. So thanks for coming out tonight. We have a very special speaker this evening. I met this individual years ago at a Kitchener meetup, and he has really excelled in his knowledge and experience in the last 4 to 5 years. I won't take all the things that he wants to talk about tonight. Big lyric welcome here for our main man, Dan Illis.
Everybody, yeah, my name is Dan Illis, and I'm a real estate investor. I've been investing for a little over 5 years now, so what I'm going to talk about tonight is obviously infill developments and land severances. I have a number of those under my belt, and we'll kind of cover, I'm going to make this presentation really like hands-on and attainable, so we're talking more like the smaller stuff, how to do this, how to get started, as opposed to like large developments. So we'll kind of cover how to do it. We'll go through some case studies on my projects, and we'll get right deep into the numbers, which I think you guys will like. And we'll go over where I see some opportunities in the market right now, and some challenges as well. So a bit about myself. I'm not from London here, but I did go to Fanshawe College for GIS and Urban Planning. I worked at a civil engineering firm for the last 11 years, which has been a huge leg up doing this kind of stuff. Spent a bit of time at a gold and copper mine in the north of BC. Started in 2018 with my first real estate project being an infill development type project. I've kind of done a little bit of everything already. I've done some condos, some BRRRRs, short-term rentals, private lending, development, flipping land. And now I'm focusing mainly on everything to do with infill developments. I've created over a dozen building lots between my own projects and helping other investors get their projects approved as well. My number one specialty with this is finding projects, running due diligence on it. My background in urban planning, civil engineering, digital mapping lends itself extremely well to that. I have a water submetering business as well. I've got a little picture of what that looks like. So I'm currently trying to grow that as well as I continue to grow my infill development business. And I got a bit of experience with ICF construction as well. So these are a couple projects that I've done personally. The first one here, Queen Street in Woodstock, that's a new build that I did. I finished last year. And we'll go deep into that one, including all the numbers involved. The middle one there is a property that I picked up, sight unseen. It was actually a power of sale. So I bought that sight unseen. The reason why I was willing to do so, because I did all my homework ahead of time and kind of knew what I could do with it. So what I ended up doing with it was I tore the house completely down. I split the land into 2 good-sized building lots, and I flipped the 2 lots off to a builder for a nice profit. The last one here is it's in Wasaga Beach. This one's very straightforward. It's just a house that was on a 100-foot wide lot that's 150 feet deep, and as you can see, the house is well off to one side. So nice, easy. I was able to split off a 50 by 150 foot lot, which I again flipped off to a builder. A couple other things I've been up to. So when I had the career in civil engineering, I did a lot of overseeing of large infrastructure projects. This one here is in Waterloo. It's the region's very first European-style living walking street. So I got to oversee that and other projects like that. And this over here is actually a tiny home I built with another investor. That was Marco Justin.
Nice.
So the two of us, pretty much just ourselves, we built this garden suite. It has a basement to it, an upper level, and technically, like garden suites, that kind of stuff is kind of the smallest form of infill development. So what is infill development? So I kind of came up with some of my own definitions for these here. So what infill development is, it's a new home construction within the existing urban boundary. It includes new development on sites not previously developed, or it can also be the redevelopment of existing sites. So an example of this would be the photo in the top there where a house was torn down and 2 duplexes were built in its place. And so what is a land severance? Well, a land severance is taking an existing parcel of land and dividing it into multiple parcels of land with their own addresses that can be individually sold or held. Sometimes each parcel may have an existing building on it, but more often than not, this creates vacant building lots. So what do I mean when I say sometimes it has an existing building on it? There are examples out there where you can take a semi-detached building that's on one title, or a row of townhouses that are all on one title, and divide those up into their own addresses, making them worth significantly more. And that is something I've helped other investors do as well. So why infill development and severances? So infill development, it's one of the best ways to curb urban sprawl. I know we've been hearing a lot about this in the news with the whole green belt, no green belt, urban boundary expansion, and walking back on that. So this is kind of where this slots in. It's quickly becoming undesirable to continue greenfield development, which is kind of then building new subdivisions on the virgin land on the end of town. And there are environmental and sustainability issues with doing it. So some of the main benefits are governments are supporting infill developments at levels we've never seen before. Projects that would have never passed 10 years, let alone 20 years, are now regularly getting built and approved. This is a biggie here. Infrastructure is already there. So having sewer, water, gas, hydro, everything there is a huge leg up, especially when we contrast that against a greenfield development. And some of these small projects, there's not actually that much of an approvals process. So some of you guys might be familiar with like a rezoning or a site plan approval, that whole process, which can be torturous at times. Some of these small ones, you can actually get them done, get them approved fairly quickly, less than 6 months if you're moving right along, where a rezone can easily be well over a year. So I'm going to go over different kinds of lot severances, and so this is to kind of give you an idea of what you can look for when you're looking at properties for this purpose. So the first example here is a corner lot, and one thing to note, there are 2 kinds of corner lot severances. There is an interior lot severance and an exterior lot severance. So that depends on where the house is located, and this is important because a lot of times zoning requirements for an exterior corner lot will end up being more than for an interior. They'll ask for bigger frontage, bigger area, larger side yard setbacks, so it's important to know that. This one here is a side lot. This is the Wasaga Beach example I gave you. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's just severing off an excessively large side yard. This one up here is a good one, and it's kind of sneaky. Not everybody thinks to look for these things here. It's called a through lot, and what it is, it's a property that fronts onto one street and it backs onto another street. And there are examples where you can cut off the rear yard onto the rear. And this one there's a really nice looking duplex sitting there now. The last one's a flag lot. These do exist, but they're rarely ever supported by municipalities. What it is, it's a lot with a very narrow frontage, almost just an access way, and a larger rear portion. These aren't supported for a number of reasons. There's problems with postal, fire, infrastructure, and if you think about it, a lot of lots could be divided up like this. I think the city would have a heyday on their hand if they just started rubber stamping these things. So how do we know if a property is severable? So when I do this, I go through a process. I have a checklist that more or less looks like this. Starting with kind of the most important down to more ancillary reasons that can potentially complicate your development. So we look at the size of the property, what's the area, what's the frontage. We look at the zoning, what does the zoning allow us to do, and how much frontage, setbacks, all that stuff is required. Infrastructure, so we look at is there water, is there sewer, is there water or sewer underneath the piece of land that we're trying to sever? Because that can easily put a stop to development as well. So we'll kind of dive into some of these things and what to look for. So how do I know this? How do I know the size of a property? Well, one of the easiest things you can do is check the is to see if you can get a survey, whether you get it through your realtor or ask your lawyer. A survey is the most absolute way to know the size of the property. Sometimes you can get your hands on this stuff. There are databases out there where you can, if you can't get it yourself, a realtor should be able to pull this kind of stuff up for you. So less exact ways to know the size of a property is to use the city's GIS or digital mapping. I'm sure a lot of us have done that at this point. And if the city doesn't have digital mapping, because some of the smaller municipalities, they won't have these nice digital mapping systems that we're all used to. So what you can do is sometimes you can go, if the city doesn't have a good digital mapping system, go check the counties. If the county doesn't have it, go check the river conservation authorities. Usually you can find a pretty decent digital mapping to pull some sizes from. So that's kind of what this looks like. This is for the Oxford County and specifically the city of Woodstock. And this is my actual example of those semis that I built this year. So when I first come in here, I look at the size of the property. So I'll measure up how much space do I have between existing houses, what is the frontage roughly, and surprisingly, some of these GIS systems are actually a lot more accurate than you might think. Some are you gotta be careful with, but I've gotten some surveys on properties where I've done preliminary concept drawings and they've actually been fairly close. So just something to be cautious of. Same with the area. Sometimes these systems, you'll have to flip through the tools and find out what they have there. So this one here fortunately has an area tool as well. So how do I know the zoning of a property? So the most common way is to check that digital mapping. Some of the cities, especially the smaller towns, they might only have them in PDF documents. You're gonna have to look it up. And as you can see for Wasaga Beach here, it's just page upon page of zoning documents for the town. So kind of a pain in the ass, but at least you can find what you need if you're willing to spend the time. Sometimes the zoning maps, you might not be able to find them anywhere. They'll be tucked in the back at the bottom of a zoning bylaw document. So that's another thing you can do to find zoning on a property. Sometimes you may have to request it, and I'll throw St. Thomas under the bus. They're the absolute worst for trying to find free information when it comes to running due diligence on properties. Thank you, whoever said that. So with the digital mapping, sometimes it won't show you what the zoning is, and you might have to come into what this is called as layers. You might have to turn a few things on, but you should be able to find the zoning. And this is what the zoning looked like for the project I did. So one of the things that I talked about earlier was if you're severing a corner lot, you can see right here they actually have different requirements, whether it's a corner lot or an interior lot. So that's why it's kind of important to know which one you're dealing with. So this was largely what I was up against when I was going through the severance process for that Woodstock build that I did. One nice little advantage I have, and sometimes you can find other people to do this for you as well, is when I did that project in Woodstock, what I ended up doing was I took the free digital mapping, and I'm a drafter by trade, so that's a pretty big bonus. So what I was able to do was I drafted up a site plan, I gave it to the city, I got them to comment on it, and they said, hey Dan, looks good, we would support this. And then I bought the second property after the first one was already owned. So I didn't pull the trigger on the second property until I actually had a pretty good idea from the city. And I've done that time and time again. I will make up a drawing, give it to the city, get them to comment on it, and then move forward on a property, which is a pretty valuable move. So this is what the survey actually looked like on that one. So on that one specifically, there was 2 houses here. They're owned both by my family and I, and we ended up severing off this rear portion. So when it comes to getting a survey, this is important as well. There's 2 kinds of surveys, and you're gonna need them both. There's a boundary survey, which is exactly what it sounds like. It goes and finds all the distances and measurements of the outside of the property. But then there's another one, it's called a topographic survey, and what that does is it goes through, it picks up all the buildings, fences, trees, all that kind of stuff, and you will need both of those surveys to take a project from start to finish. So you might as well just get your surveyor to get them both when you're ordering one. So this was kind of the severance plan that I submitted. So what I ended up doing, and again, bonus being a drafter myself, but you guys can always find people doing that kind of work, myself included. I ended up just taking the survey. I redrew the site plan based on the actual survey, so that's what I actually submitted to the city, and it was ultimately approved. Conservation authorities, these can be problematic too, because a conservation authority can cause a lot of problems, and sometimes too, it's not obvious that you're in a river conservation authority's jurisdiction. So fortunately for me here, I'm not. I circled the whole properties there in yellow, and you can see I'm not in it. But there are other times where a creek may be quite some ways away, but when you go check the mapping, you could end up in their jurisdiction. And what can happen is they'll get a say over your development. It doesn't always outright mean stopping it, but they could put things on you such as you're not allowed to grade portions of the property, and maybe you're building a retaining wall to not do that. So there's all sorts of problems and challenges that river conservation authorities can cause for you. It's best to avoid them when you can. So this is a money slide here. This one's got some good info for you. So infrastructure. How can we find out what kind of infrastructures is both available in the street or potentially underneath the property that I'm looking to sever? Biggest tip that I have for you here is Google Street View will tell you way more than you think it might. So when you're looking at Google Street View and you're looking at a property, so the property I severed is kind of just off to the side here. We can see here that sanitary sewers are always in the middle of the road, no matter where you are, almost always in the middle of the road. Storm is usually off to the side, same as water. When we're walking around, we've all seen this time and time again, we'll see paint marks out there. We'll see blue paint marks and green and red. They always mean the same thing. Green is always sewer, red is always storm, blue is always water. So sometimes, let's say you go on Google Street View and you want to get an idea of what the infrastructure looks like. And let's say there's nothing there, first thing I would do is I would look for those paint marks. It's possible Google Street View picked up some of those paint marks. Another thing you can do too is on Google Street View, you can go back in time. And this has actually saved me before because I was looking at buying a property, didn't see any evidence of any infrastructure that would be problematic. Went back in time on Google Street View, sure enough, 10 years ago, there's a blue paint mark running right down the middle of the property. And yeah, there was a huge water main under the vacant lot. So that's one thing you can do to get an idea of the infrastructure. And what this here is, this is called a plan and profile drawing. This is a drawing that all municipalities have drawings like this for the entire city. This is what the infrastructure actually looks like, and it shows you how deep everything is too. So the bottom half here is the profile. This is showing you the sewers, how deep they are. The top half is actually showing the infrastructure and exactly what's there. So when I look at, this is the portion here that I severed off, I can see that I don't have any infrastructure running underneath that there. It's also really handy too to know the depth of the sewers ahead of time, right? Because that's going to tell you how deep you can set your basements, or if you're going to have any trouble with outletting your sewers to the main. So you can usually get these for free just by asking a city's engineering department. Another thing you got to watch out for too is there infrastructure in the way? Is there a hydro pole, a fire hydrant? Sometimes you got to watch for that kind of stuff. Not that it's a reason not to do something, but you may end up having to move infrastructure. For those who've never seen this, that's what a hydrant looks like when it's getting installed. So as you can probably imagine, that's not cheap to do. That would cost at least $5-10 grand to move that hydrant, right? So something you got to watch for when you're doing due diligence on this kind of stuff. So a couple other little things you got to watch for that I won't call them showstoppers by any means, but definitely stuff that can cause you problems is road ownership. So you could be, let's say we'll use London for an example. I could be mistaken, but the county of Middles, no, actually no, London's a bad example. I'll use the region of Waterloo. So Kitchener, for example, owns most of the roads, but there are a handful of roads that the region of Waterloo owns and operates. When you go into a development project and you're on a road that doesn't belong to the municipality that you think it belongs on, well, the other jurisdiction is going to get a say in it. And I did that, actually. I did one in Elmira, just north of Waterloo, and the region of Waterloo got involved when I bought it. I thought I was just dealing with Elmira, so that's something to watch for. Heritage, that's a big one, and I know there's probably some folks in the room that have dealt with this. But there are lots of ways to find out if a property is deemed heritage ahead of time. There are heritage registers. Some cities you can download entire spreadsheets and just search through them. Archaeological, this one's kind of tough to find, but the easiest, what archaeological is if you're in an area that's been identified as potentially archaeologically significant, they can put a study on you which has you potentially if it's identified and they find reason to, they'll actually have you doing test pits to look for artifacts. If they find artifacts, holy shit, that's a huge problem. We've seen road reconstruction projects in the news getting held up for a year. There was one in Kitchener where that happened.
Yeah, when they were putting in.
Yeah, they found some arrowheads and some other stuff on King Street, and it really delayed it. So archaeological can be tough to find, but there are ways to do it. One, being near water is a telltale sign. You gotta watch for that. One of the other ways is to go look at what kind of conditions they've been putting on similar developments. If other ones similar to yours has an archaeological requirement, then you should plan for it as well. The official plan is kind of the layer above zoning. If a zoning is what you can do today, an official plan is what you can do tomorrow. It's what the city's long-term outlooks are. I'll give you an example of where I saw an official plan burn an investor. They had a property they wanted to redevelop into 3 or 4 units, whatever. The city actually wanted much higher density there, and they weren't allowed to do any sort of severance or development. They wanted a high rise there. So if had you checked the official plan and really understood it, that's something that would have maybe been caught. Environmental, is the property potentially contaminated? Usually if it's near anything commercial or industrial, that can be a problem. That one, I steer clear. I won't touch anything that has environmental concerns. Noise is another one. Like, are you located near a lumber yard? There's some stuff that can come out of that, but usually nothing big. And it says interstate, because I actually did a similar presentation for some Americans, so if anyone's wondering. But arterial roads, roadways, MTO roads, and the MTO and CN rail can cause some problems as well. And I actually have had CN rail cause me some problems. So we'll go through a case study. This is the one I did in Wasaga Beach here. So as I mentioned, this one's pretty straightforward. It's just a 100-foot wide lot by 150 feet deep. The house was notably onto one side. So as we can see in the drawing here, here's a couple of things that came out of this one. So the overhead wire for the existing house actually crossed over the new lot. So ended up having to move the hydro pole. I ended up putting it over here on the other side of the property and had to get the electric line moved. So not a huge deal, but there's a little bit of cost involved with that and something you gotta watch for. This one here, one of the conditions that was put on me to get this property severed is I had to bring in sewer and water for the new lot. So that was expected, and that's fine. So I was actually on site for this. I went up to Wasaga Beach. As the contractor was there installing the water and sewer for the new lot, I had to learn the hard way that the existing sewer and existing water were also on the new lot. So at the 11th hour, had to cut open the road, bring in a new sewer, new water, which there's some significant cost to that. So again, I did my due diligence on it. The city gave me drawings that showed both the sewer and water coming out the front of the existing house, but in actuality, it wasn't the case. So hard to catch that one, but these kind of things happen. So here's kind of what the new lot looked like when it was serviced. So like I said, green is always sewer, so that's the new sewer, new water. One thing I had to do with this one was the parking for the existing house was on the new lot. So in addition to having to install new sewer and water, I had to move the driveway over as well. And so that's actually a big one too when you're looking at these properties. Where is the existing parking? There's a lot of houses with large side yards, but if it's the only parking, you might not be able to do it unless you can maybe flip the driveway to the other side of the house. So something else to keep in mind. So this house was actually, I got off a wholesaler. I also bought this one sight unseen because I had done all my due diligence ahead of time and felt confident with it. But it was kind of just a crappy hoarder house, nothing special. Ended up fixing up the house. Again, nothing real fancy, but made it nice looking, livable. So we'll go through the numbers on this. So the wholesaler had it on their list for $425,000. Because I was willing just to scoop it up without any showings, they let it go for $410,000. They had it locked up for $390,000, so I paid a $20,000 assignment fee and just shy of $6,000 in closing costs. So to get the property, I'm in for about $416,000. So to fix up the existing house, spent about $46,000. Some insurance cost there at $700. And then, so my holding cost, at that time, I was working full-time at the engineering job, so I was able to get an A-rate mortgage with an 80% LTV. So we had a $312,000 mortgage. So with the mortgage, electric, water, property tax, gas, I was about $17,000, and I held this property for pretty much 12 months exactly. So that's what that came to. So for the total expenses for the existing house, I'm in at around $63,000. So the development cost, the survey cost me just shy of $5,000. The application to sever land was $1,700. I was fortunate on this one. I did not need any minor variances to make this one work just because the property was so large. Moving the electric pole cost me $1,000. It absolutely costs more to do that work, but a lot of times the cities and the utility are willing to subsidize that because you're giving them a new customer. The engineering plans cost me about $4,000, so those were the plans drawn up to install the new sewer and water and grade the property as well. Legal costs are about $1,600, a bit of miscellaneous. The servicing cost, this one hurt. We're supposed to be around $45,000, but by the time I had to install the new sewer and water for the existing house, that ran up to about $67,000. So my total development cost came in at around $81,000. So I was able to sell the existing house for $500,000. I sold the vacant lot for $312,500, and realtor commission was about $36,000. Lawyer to close was $3,000, and walked away with about $212,000. So this was a really good one. And yeah, like full transparency, I did hit the hot market to some extent here. So I still would have done well on this no matter what, but there is a bit of a market boost to that number. So we'll go through kind of the new build that I did in Woodstock, how I got to this here. So as I mentioned here, I own these two properties here, and I was able to cut off both their backyards. And this is actually the second time this house was built. So I had some friends, they built this exact same building, St. Catharines. I borrowed their drawings, I squeezed it in about 10 inches, made the house about a foot longer, and I literally built the house again, which was it was kind of nice. It was like having a cheat code for all the problems that I could.
Andy Trans?
Yeah. So I actually ended up needing an 8-foot tall retaining wall, which I'll show you some photos on, at about 80 feet long. I made the basements about a little over 9 feet tall to accommodate secondary units. Yeah, the basements are set up for additional suites. The basements are only accessible from side doors on the outside. The upstairs units can't get down there. I put electric panels in the garage so that way I can put separate electric panels. In the basement, I'm going to split all the utilities here. This is strange, but the utility rooms are actually up on the second floor, so that way I could have a furnace, hot water heater, every last little thing up on the second floor and put separate all in the basement.
When you say the second floor, you mean the main floor?
No, second floor. I've got furnace pushing air down in that one. So just kind of a space thing. So the garages, I strategically placed the garages on the outside so I could use those 4-foot side yards towards parking. If you put the garages on the inside, you might risk having your allowable parking space pinched a little bit. So that's how I got to that. There are challenges by putting the garages on the outside too. Venting in the basement is gonna suck because I can't just come out the sidewall. So there's positives and negatives to your garage placement. I ended up doing underground electric on this. That's why you don't see any overhead wires. So this was interesting. This was technically built as a left-right duplex. So what Woodstock wanted me to do, and other cities do this as well, is they want you to have, at a minimum, the foundation in place before you sever it onto 2 separate addresses. And the reason why they do that is so that the common wall doesn't errantly end up on the other person's side. So that's what Woodstock wanted. Other places won't make you do that. It actually caused me some problems. What happened was I was done this build and I'm still waiting for the severance to go through. Interest rates went up a few times and I couldn't put mortgages on this until the severance went through, right? So I ended up paying for that decision a little bit. Took me about 8 months to complete this, and I general contracted it all myself. This was my first build. I shouldn't say all myself. Martin here did a ton of work around there. So, but yeah, I was on site often, kind of overseeing things, swinging hammer at times. But yeah, so this is kind of what it looked like before I built it. So as you can see here, there's like a really heavy cross fall there, and that's why I ended up needing that retaining wall. So a couple other things I had to do was I had to get Canada Post to move their mailboxes, which they actually did, no problem. I thought that was going to be harder than it was. I had to get the trees removed. I had to remove a detached garage there as well. And kind of behind that vehicle, there's actually some Bell and Rogers pedestals there. So that was another thing I kind of had to account for. This is what the excavation looked like, and you can kind of see how deep the excavation is here. That's showing you how heavy that cross fall was. One thing to note here is a lot of times when you're doing these builds, you're going to want to put the basement unit in there, and you're going to want that extra head height. I think a lot of people do that. So I went with that 9-foot height, but the one thing to note, not all contractors do 9-foot basements. Not all contractors have 9-foot forms. Some have to go and rent them if they're even going to do it. So if you're shopping around for concrete contractors and you're doing something like this, definitely ask the 9-foot wall question. So this is that massive retaining wall I had to build. Like I said, it's about 80 feet long, over 8 feet high. This was not cheap either. That ended up costing, I don't know, 40, 50,000. So it's something that I budgeted for. So when you're looking at these and you see stuff like this, again, not a reason not to do something, but definitely has to be factored in if you need a retaining wall to make a property work for development. So that's actually what it ended up looking like at the back. And that house there is one of the existing houses that I cut the rear yard off of. Actually, I didn't even build it big enough the first time. I had to get the contractor to come back and build a little bit bigger, since I kind of trashed the rear yard of the existing house. So these are what the basements look like. So as of today, I still don't have the basement units done, and that's something that we're gonna get into. But this is what it looks like. It's 9'3", so the reason for the extra little 3 inches there is on top of your foundation, you can actually go up to it's called a triple top plate. You can stack 2x6s up 3 times and get an extra up to 4.5 inches out of that. So when you're doing all your fire separation and having to build down your ceiling and mess around with things like ductwork, it's like the cheap and easy way to gain an extra 3-4 inches. So this one here, like I said, the only entrance is from the outside. I've got a 3-piece bathroom roughed in. I preemptively put some venting in for water. There was definitely some preliminary stuff you kind of have to do when you do this. I put conduit under the garage floor to pull an electric line through when it comes time to put in the second panel. The HVAC you see in this photo will actually be cut and capped and abandoned. I'll end up redoing the entire HVAC for the basement, but that's what I had to do to get this passed for now. I'm going to do a 2-bedroom layout. Essentially, I'll wall underneath the beam and put 2 bedrooms in there. And yeah, for anyone that's done these basement suites, you're probably aware of some of the fire separation requirements, but on a new build, they're even more stringent. So yeah, it'll be 2 layers of 5/8 drywall, kind of everywhere. I might even have to do that on this wall here as well. This is how it finished up inside. So nothing overly fancy. It's definitely a landlord special, but turned out nice enough. And like I said, Martin here did a lot of the kitchen, flooring, bathroom work for me. These are what the floor plans look like. And by the way, I'm happy to share floor plans with anybody. If anyone wants to reach out, I'll just take a copy of them. So these semis are really, really basic. Every townhouse, every semi almost looks like this. It's a narrow walkway, a great room and a kitchen. That's nothing new. Upstairs though, what I got is I got 3 really good sized bedrooms. You can see I've got a laundry room upstairs, a utility room upstairs, nice big ensuite as well. So this is what I ended up doing to make the whole utility thing work. So we'll go through
So when you pulled the permit, did you tell them you were going to put accessory units in the basement?
I did the whole wet bar thing. Where
Wait, you did what?
I did the wet bar thing where you show a wet bar because they weren't going to allow me to do secondary units, and I'm still in a fight with Woodstock on this. Like I'll show you guys some stuff about that.
They can't stop you now.
Yes, they can. Yes, they can.
You can put it. Well, I can't. Why? Just why are they trying to stop it?
You could ask about the side door. That's part of that.
I have a whole slide on that, but I'll put it this way: there's a reason why they're still sitting unfinished. But here's all the numbers on this. The survey to get this done was about $3,000, and a lawyer was about $3,500. And the application to sever land was about a little over $3,000. So that included an application to sever and a whole bunch of minor variances. I ended up getting 5 minor variances to make this work, and the city was all in support of it. This is pretty close to downtown Woodstock, and they did want the infill development. One interesting thing here is, if you look at this, I spent a little less than $10,000 to get this property severed, but the land right at the time of severing it would have been worth about $350,000 for those 2 building lots, right? So this is the cheapest way you will ever get land, is by taking an existing house, especially if you can keep the house, and sever off the excess land. It's a real safe and foolproof way to get into this kind of development, and that's what I've done here. Building permits and fees were around $42,000. They're actually pretty low in Woodstock. Some of the larger cities charge that for 1 unit. Others charge even more than that for 1 unit. Cost me about $676,000 to construct this. I had a bit of residual work this past year, things like decks and fences, that kind of stuff. And I spent about $87,000 out of pocket for HST. So yeah, all my out of pocket cost to get this built was $845,000. So my tax bill on this, and some of you already know, that's going to change when you build. When I built this building, what happened was I built and held onto the building. So I had to do what was called an HST self-assessment. So when a new builder builds a home and they sell it, HST is involved. When you build a new home and you hang on to it to rent, they still want their cut. So what happened was I had to get it appraised and pay HST on that appraised amount. So that came to $117,000. I was able to directly write off the HST I spent building this, and as of today at least, you can get $24,000 credits per rental unit that you build. So when it was all said and done, I actually walked away with a bit of a refund. Now that's not normal. Normally what happens when you do this, you'll end up owing a bit of money by the time all these numbers washed out. But the reason why I got a refund is because the market took a nosedive as I was building this, right? So it appraised for less than it otherwise would have. And construction costs were also through the roof. I hit peak lumber too. If we all remember that run up in lumber, I hit the absolute peak of that, which increased some construction costs. So the 2 semis combined, once they were severed, are appraised for $1.26 million. So I think $630,000 each. So my cash in the deal initially was $845,000. My total equity on completion was about $414,000. So I'm right now in a bit of an interim phase where the project complete is all 4 units done and rented, stabilized. But in this interim phase that I'm in now without the basement units, I got a mortgage on it for $800,000, which is a 63.5% LTV. That still has me with about 45,000 left in the deal. I got mortgages on it for 5.89%, which has my monthly mortgage payment for the 2 semis at 4,700, and I'm currently bringing in 4,200. So, and then insurance is about $200. So I'm actually at a bit of a monthly loss right now. So why I'm fighting so hard to get these basement units done. Property tax won't be applied to this right away. So I actually haven't paid property tax on these completed units. I'll get hit with a back tax bill, and then I'll be paying property tax going forward. So here's what the numbers should look like when I get the basement units done. Is I'm expecting the 2 basement units to rent for a combined 3,200. The 2 upper units are renting for 4,200 currently. They're actually not rent controlled, so that'll be up by the time I get around to this. The mortgage is currently 4,700, and the estimated property tax will be around 600 for the 2, and that's just me looking at similar new build semis. Insurance, I'm sure, will go up a little bit. So my monthly financials on that it'll put me in a cash flow position of a little over 1,800. Now, it'll cost me about 140,000 to finish the 2 basement units, and I already have 45 still in the deal. So I want all my cash back out, right? So I want that extra 185,000 out. So I think the 2 semis will appraise for a combined 1.5 million once I'm done the 2 basement units. I'll put a new mortgage on it. I really only want my cash out. I don't feel like taking out any more than that. So that puts me at a 65% LTV at 980,000. My new mortgage payment will be around 5,700, and I should be cash flowing a little bit under $800 with 0 money left in the deal. And that should also have a little over $500,000 of equity on completion. So challenges with infill. So here's the problems I'm having with getting these basement units done. So Bill 23 and Bill 108, some of the recent legislation that we've seen the province come forward with is not being honored by all cities. They're finding ways to prevent infill development, and in my case, basement units. There are city councils voting against, they're voting against bringing their zoning bylaws in line with what the province has put forward. I've watched many city council meetings where councillors turn down what's being put forward. And many applications are still being forced to go to the Ontario Land Tribunal or the OLT. I think a lot of cities, in an effort to save face, find it easy to make the province look like the bad guys. So they will deny a project that's maybe upsetting the neighborhood, just so it can be appealed, and the province will almost always approve it. So here's the problem I'm having. Here's why I don't have basement units at the moment. Woodstock requires 3 parking spaces for a 2-unit building. They require 2 for the upper unit, and they require 1 for the lower unit. So the problem I'm having, you're looking at this and you're like, Dan, what's up? There's lots of parking there. You're right. The problem I'm having is I'm not allowed to count the first 20 feet of my driveway. And although I can fit 2 cars in here side by side, it's not quite wide enough on paper. So although I can fit 5 cars in each driveway plus the garage, in the city's eyes, I only have 2 parking spaces. I need 3. And they're using that to stop me from moving forward. And I've spoken to planning, I've kind of tried everything under the sun. I've talked about numerous minor variances, all of which I'm told they won't support and won't pass. So I had to get extra creative on this one. And what I ended up doing is I reached out to the mayor directly and talked to a couple other councillors. I actually got the mayor to come over to look at this. And I had the mayor in the basement. I said, look at these unfinished basements. I said, this is right downtown. There are numerous policies calling for exactly what I've done here. And he said, this isn't right. The mayor's actually very pro-development, as are a few other councillors. So the mayor was not my hurdle on this, but he's my biggest ally on this. So I got them to all come over and look at this and start asking questions around the city. So I did that a few months ago. Still wasn't getting where I needed to go on this. So last Monday, I went and told council what I thought about their zoning. So I went up in front of council, in front of the council and the mayor. I told them what their parking requirements were causing here. I told them that if they keep these parking requirements, that all these ADUs that they're calling for, they're not gonna work. Because if you can't get a double wide driveway and you need to get 3 cars here, I'm like, the amount of properties that will actually just lend itself to that, very limited. So I went in there, I made a lot of really good points to them, and that was Monday last week. They were voting on a bunch of changes on the Thursday. They actually took a few things that I said, brought it forward, and it passed on Thursday, 4-3. 4-3. So the 3 councillors are still causing this kind of nonsense. But they actually didn't concede much. All they did concede is they would bump the allowable driveway width up from 50 to 65. That should get me personally over the hump. That doesn't do much in the grand scheme of things. But the other nice thing they did too is a lot of the points I made on Monday night, they brought it up again on their Thursday meeting, and they're having an entire separate session to take input on how they can get in more density in the downtown area. So the mayor is taking it seriously, as are some of the councillors. Other councillors are just no to every last little thing to do with infill. If anyone wants, I can share you that video as well.
We would have come with you, Dan. We would have been there. That room was pretty empty.
I was the last one to speak. It was like heated in there before because there was some other developments that people were just having none of. So since I was the last one, was able to kind of get away with it. So I want to talk a bit about the current market, the current kind of development market, land market, that kind of stuff. I'm going to use Wasaga Beach as an example since I did a project there. So, and I made a post about this too for anyone that follows me. You might have already seen me talk about this a little bit.
That's why you're here.
Thanks, buddy. Glad you read it. So, this is roughly what Wasaga Beach looked like in years prior. There would be, give or take, maybe 8 to 12 pieces of land or developments for sale. When we look at Wasaga Beach today, there are over 70 or 80 pieces of land or development projects for sale. They're all just sitting there, most of them for the better part of the year at this point. And of those 70, 80 and beyond properties that are just sitting there, 7 have sold in the last 6 months. So these kind of things are just sitting there. So part of the reason why I'm telling you this is I talked about how I've flipped some land and you run numbers on all this stuff. If that is your intention or it's one of your backup plans, I think you got to keep in mind about what's actually going on in the market right now. And as much as houses are sitting there, land is 10 times worse. It is just sitting there. So I'm going to give you some exact examples of where I see this as problematic. So this one here is actually just up the road from the one I sold. And keep in mind, the one I sold, I got $312,000 at the peak of the market. This one here has been listed for $375,000 when interest rates are at 6-7%. When I sold mine, it was at like 2 and change. How can you ask $375,000 for exactly the same lot when interest rates are through the roof? The short answer is you can't. It's sitting there for 6 months. It's going to sit there for another 6, right? So, and actually, this one's a corner lot too. You don't even get the nice privacy you get with the one I had. Here's another example. Again, this lot here is a similar size to the one I sold. Here's the listing history on it. They started at $500,000. Again, I sold a similar lot for $312,000, and you can see the kind of really minor reductions that they've done since then. So this thing's almost been on the market for a year. It's on a busy road. It's a corner lot. It's fully treed. Your tree cutting bill is going to be absurd on that. I don't think these people are serious about trying to sell this. So why am I showing you this? So here's a point I want to make here. What somebody is willing to pay for land to build their principal residence or their dream home is completely irrelevant to what a builder or an investor can pay. Nobody is building their dream home on a 30-fill infill lot, right? So why am I saying this? The problem we have is a piece of land will sell. maybe in this instance, maybe it'll sell for 500,000, and somebody goes and builds their dream home on it. Well, Mr. Infill here thinks that the $500,000 piece of land that somebody built their dream home on is the same as what they have. It's not. You have to really consider what a builder or an investor can pay for a piece of land. And as builders and investors, we need to be able to separate ourselves from like what some of these other comps are, because the comps that I just mentioned, people building dream home, are absolutely not comps for when it comes to building investment properties. So with all that said, there is absolutely opportunity when it comes to all this land that's just sitting around here. So this is my latest project. I picked this up this spring. This is in the town of Goderich on Lake Huron. So what this is, it's a 104 foot by 104 foot vacant building lot. It had been listed for $395,000 spring of last year. It actually sold. The market took a nosedive and the buyer walked away from their deposit. So it came back on the market. When I came across it, it was listed for $350,000. I threw 2 offers at it. So at the same time, I threw $280 cash and I threw $300,000 with a vendor take back to see if they would go for either one. They said no to the vendor take back right away. And they came back at me with $330,000. And I said no. So later that night, they came back, they said, well, would you do $300,000? I said no. So by the next morning, they came back, they're like $290,000. I said, yeah, I'll do that. So in addition to that, to getting pretty much my price, I was also able to get a 14-day due diligence period. We were never able to get those when the market was hot. So I was able to do all my homework on this property in the 14 days. I was able to get some like other concessions with it too. So one of the reasons why getting that due diligence was so valuable with something like this is I managed to actually have a formal pre-consultation meeting with the town of Goderich in the time I was only under contract with it. So when I approached them, I said, hey, I want to divide this into 2 or 3 lots. And they looked at it, they were pretty supportive. Didn't give me really any pushback on it at all. But the interesting thing is the town's planner said to me, they said, hey Dan, they said, we're actually about to overhaul our zoning completely. I'm like, oh yeah. So I said, could I get a copy? They gave me a copy of their new zoning. I looked up their new zoning. When I locked this up, I thought I was gonna have to sever the land and get minor variances, which can take 6 to 10, 12 months, depending on what conditions they put on you. With their new zoning, I can actually just go ahead and do it. I can totally scrap all the severance, minor variance. And so instead of doing that, I've actually right now in the process of getting building permits. So that literally put me ahead by like 10 months because I was willing to do the due diligence on that. So what I'm planning to build is three townhouses. I'm going for a 1.5 story. Look, there are some height restrictions here, and each one will have a basement unit for a total of 6 units. And then yeah, another thing too with why this is such a good opportunity example
You looked into your parking?
Pardon?
You looked into your parking?
Oh, it's mint this time. It's mint this time. But it is a good example though for you. When Woodstock's fighting me tooth and nail on parking and basement units, Goderich goes, hey Dan, you're gonna put in basement units, right? Yeah, of course. Like it's totally different. And I brought up the parking thing to them. They said no, just one space per unit. We don't count the garages, and that's fine. So I'm able to do my site plan takes that into account, and it shouldn't be a problem. But yeah, on the opportunity aspect of this, I was able to pick this up for about $2,800 a front foot. The closest comp, which is just down the street, sold just before it for like $4,300 a front foot. So I got a killer price on this thing. So my point with all of this is, if land is going to just be sitting there, there's opportunity there. There's opportunity to throw a price at it that works for you. It doesn't matter how low it is. I don't care how low it is. Run your numbers and don't be afraid to offer on something. If I could make another suggestion, it would be look for stuff like this that has further upside. I knew right away when I looked at this that of course it can be divided another time or two. Or maybe, like I said, maybe get some inside info and you know the zoning's gonna change and you can do 9 units where you could have used to only do 3. I think anytime you can find something that can be further divided, or you can change the use on it, you can make some really good money and add a lot of value. So yeah, I see a lot of opportunity in this niche right now. And
So the zoning on that was what? What was the zoning?
the zoning before was R2.
Yes,
It's R2 now,
yes.
but they made R2 way more generous.
Like you could do 3 units like you do.
Yeah, I can just go ahead and build townhouses where before I would have needed all sorts of minor
So really,
variances.
you're not severing this lot at all.
I will eventually. I'll probably sever the townhouses to be their own addresses because it'll make each townhouse worth more being its own address.
So you can do it after the build.
Yep.
Oh.
And I can do it never too, because the zoning allows for a multiple building, so apartment building, right? So I can build this, and it's kind of up to me if I want to separate.
But doing without severing it and doing the way you did it, there isn't land development cheaper? Like the development charges?
You know what's
If you had
funny?
3 parcels, would it be more expensive?
It's per unit. It's per unit.
Oh, so it doesn't really matter.
No, the other thing too, the development charges in Godrich, and I still don't fully believe this, are like 3,500 a unit.
Yeah.
Toronto, they're over 100,000. Woodstock was 21,000. Elmira was about 56,000. Had I built that out.
I'm pretty sure.
Toronto was about 98,000, and they voted to jack it up by 40%. Not passed.
And Godrich is actually a booming little metropolis.
It is.
It's a nice place.
It's a really nice town. There's some upside to this. I know some people kind of avoid the small town thing, and I understand why.
It's a big little
But,
town.
but I think it's a big little town. I think some of these small towns that have upside, such as Killer Beach and Lake Huron, and I think there's some value to it.
And
So
there's employment there too, right? Rouge Nicole's not that far.
it's not far, but the salt mine's the big one. It's the
Yeah.
largest salt mine, I think, in North America. So,
Oh, yeah.
anyways, there's my contact info. I try and stay active on Instagram and Facebook, and if you add me, I'll hit you back. And that's the website for my water submetering business.
Fantastic.
So going back to that Woodstock, you had 630-some thousand for the bill. How many square feet, like what was the price per square foot that we're gonna end up?
I was able to get it done for a shade under 200. That's me doing it. That's like me general contracting it.
Yeah, but you still subbed out the framing and you still subbed out brick.
I did, and
Electrical, so you just cut the 10% or 15% out, right?
for what, like
For
Jen?
GC, yeah,
Yeah, 15 at least.
yeah.
15 at least.
No, it's good,
Yeah.
I'm just saying that's a good price sheet per square foot. And that's including the square foot of the basement also,
No, the basement will be on top of that.
which is,
Yeah, the basement will be on top of that. So a lot of it's rental grade. Like that's LVP. That's lower end kitchens. Yeah, I did quartz countertops, but I mean, I spent some money on the facade, but other than that, a lot of it's real rental grade. You know what I mean? If you want to go,
Fine.
yeah, which is fine, totally fine by me. So yeah.
Very good. Anybody have any more questions for Dan, other than Mike? Mike, you've had your time.
yeah.
It's appreciated.
Mr. Clark?
Are the development costs inside London 100K per unit? No?
I don't know what I haven't built in London.
30?
Yeah.
Billion, billion.
So how much are they in London?
I think 30, that's what I heard. Something like this today.
Okay.
Who here in the room has a property that they think has potential for a severance, other than Mike?
Working on one right now.
Or a couple
Okay.
that are
Do you mind sharing?
Yeah.
I got my eyes on. Yeah.
Old South, 108 Briscoe. I'm trying to do it to keep the existing house, which is gonna be a struggle. Because the lot right now is 60 by 189. But the house sits right at the 30-foot mark, so I can only sever off 8 meters. The city wants 9. It went to the committee today to discuss, so we'll see what happens. I think the
I'm
3
sure Martin's up against that exact
Oh,
same
yeah.
thing.
Won't go past the like below 9 meters.
Yeah?
So I'm doing a link
right?
link dwelling, but it's I'm struggling with the same exact thing.
Yeah.
And it's painful as well.
There's 3 on the street that are under that.
Yeah.
Currently, so there's a 21 foot, there's a 22 and a 25 foot.
I saw a 17-foot one.
Yeah.
And it was, but like it's they won't use that as a precedent.
So I can get it if I take the house out, but I do.
So on that point, you bring up a really good point though. There's the whole debate, do I keep the house or do I tear it down? The numbers always work better when you can keep the house.
Oh, it's insane.
It absurdly better. If we look at that Wasaga, look at the Wasaga Beach example. If I tore that, then that house was shit too. So like if I tore that house down and I had people telling me to do that, and I sold both lots for $312,000, $200,000, right?
Oh,
So
sure.
and it works that way almost everywhere. It's rare that tearing the building down actually makes as much sense as keeping it, unless you can get enough density out of it.
Yeah.
The other tip too is if you're looking at purchasing one of these, financing land's not always easy. You might be able to get 50% LTV if even. When there's a house on there, you get a mortgage on it, right? And that way you put a tenant in there, have it somewhat cover itself, and then while that's happening, you go work on severing the land. That's like the safest way you'll ever do a severance is if you can do it that way.
Because I tried the front and back, I might be able to get that. I can't get the flag. They said
They won't give you the, I can assure you they won't give you the
They said no
flag.
more flags, because I wanted to see if I could get in any way to add more units, because the zoning changed. Any zoning right now, you can go to 4 units.
What is the house? Is it like an old 2-story? Is it
It's like 1.5 stories, it's a piece of junk.
I actually know people that are picking up a house and moving it over to make the side yard work.
So that's what I have debated, is whether or not, because the basement's almost unusable, is whether or not, yeah, just pick it up and move it. Like, I'm talking like a foot.
You might find that doesn't pencil out either, because as you can assume, moving a house
Cost.
is
It's better, at that point, it's better to tear it down and put up
it
semis.
probably is.
There's a guy I met that moves houses. It was
Yeah, it's
$30,000.
One got moved just down the street from this one.
Yeah, so he said $30,000 to move the house, and then by the time you like pour foundation, you're like $90,000 into which is not bad.
It's not bad, 'cause you're probably gonna pay more to move your.
But then you have a usable basement, right? So if you have a
Yeah.
6-foot basement and you can do 8 foot, you have a usable. You built a unit for $100,000.
Because then you can add more units, and then now you've
Yeah.
got 2 properties, and you can go from one.
Yeah, but like sometimes you have to, if it's like brick, so they tell you to tear it down. Like there's certain requirements obviously when you're moving, but it's something to consider. So.
I'm always happy to
It's not
help
much.
people look at ask those kind of projects. Like if you want a second look at it, or you
You have a
want to grab
10-unit
anybody
house
else.
right now.
Yeah.
I've reached out to Dan over the years. He's always happy to chat. If anybody has questions, make sure connect with Dan. And thanks again. Big round of applause. One more question for you.
Okay, so Justin, you see my house,
Yeah.
right?
Where
So-
station?
No. Terrence.
Oh, Terrence. Yeah,
Yeah.
Terrence.
So, the backyard there, my first development thing, I think I'd be able to rip that tree out, knock that garage down, build a 3-bay or 4-bay garage with 2 units above it. It's zone R2-2, but then you can put 4 units anywhere, right? And then a hallway between the house and there. Do you think that I do, like, should I?
Is it
Four
4
units
units
in
everywhere? Or is it, I
London
think
is-
it's 3 units per for the house. Is it?
Yeah,
And
the
then
If you
4
were in
units
a bedroom,
anywhere
so-
in London is a maximum 5 bedrooms.
they're gonna revise that.
They
though.
will
They said,
eventually,
they said
but-
Jan 1, there's changes coming.
Yeah. Just
Where'd you
see
hear that?
that.
I was on
I was on a Zoom call with the manager.
last week.
Yeah.
Last week.
I
Did they
heard
say
the same-
January?
They said January.
January's new, they didn't tell you exactly what it is, but January something.
It has to change. 4 units and 5
4
bedrooms
units
doesn't make
and
sense.
on one
It's more
person.
bedrooms than you're getting.
Yeah, it's not gonna work.
But that ADU, they said has to, the building, the new building you built as part of that, has to go to the back of the property. You can't go anywhere else.
That works for my house.
Yeah, you'll be okay.
Wait till January.
Actually, one other thing I've been looking at, and I think it'll work to some degree too, is with all these houses just sitting there on the market, you can do searches for all the properties over 60 feet, all the properties over 70, all the properties over 80. And it's possible that with some of these new changes, like London allowing you to do 4 units, tearing down actually starts to make sense again. If you can throw a low offer at it, you take it, you can split it into 2 and get 8 units. Pretty sure that'll work pretty good. So something else you can look at too.
Awesome. Very good. Really happy you came out, Dan. Thanks so much.
Is something wrong with this?
Believe it or not, that was Dan's first time in front of an audience like this. He's done the podcast thing, but first time up in front. How'd he do?
I think I know what I'm talking about.
Well, that's right. That's when that's. That's a serious amount of notches. Are they meaty and cheesy or just cheesy?
Sorry, is that? Yeah, so I apologize for
That looks like.
I
had the chicken Alfredo. You ever get like the carb pie? Oh yeah, like I'm sitting there like, woo! Chicken Alfredo kicking in. It's good.